Karen stood at her kitchen window, watching new neighbors move into the old Patterson place. They had children, a dog, and, she noticed with dark amusement, they were hanging unauthorized decorations without filing the proper paperwork. For the first time in years, she didn't reach for her camera or citation pad. Instead, she pulled out her laptop and began typing. For sale by owner. Willowbrook Estates Executive Home. Motivated seller. No HOA restrictions apply to new owner. But as she hit publish on the listing, her phone chimed with an email from a law firm in the next county. The subject line made her heart race. HOA consulting opportunity. Prestigious gated community seeks experienced administrator. Karen smiled for the first time in weeks. Willowbrook Estates might have rejected her vision, but somewhere else, people still understood the value of proper standards. The game wasn't over. It was just changing venues. Karen Whitmore collapsed onto her perfectly manicured lawn, her designer blazer soaking up the sprinkler water as sobs racked her body. The certified letter in her trembling hands bore the HOA's official seal, a lawsuit for $47,000 in damages and legal fees. Her own HOA was suing her. 15 minutes earlier, she'd stood in her marble-tiled foyer, tearing open what she'd assumed was another routine violation notice. Instead, the words willful harassment, abuse of authority, and punitive damages swam before her eyes like a death sentence. 3 years of wielding the HOA presidency like a sword had finally cut both ways. The irony wasn't lost on her. She'd issued 847 violation notices in her tenure, but never imagined receiving one herself. Now her neighbors, the very people she'd protected from property value decline, had banded together with a class action attorney who specialized in HOA abuse cases. Karen, her husband Dave, burst through the front door, his face flushed from running. The news van just pulled up. Channel 7 wants a statement about the lawsuit. She scrambled to her feet, grass stains marking her cream-colored pants. This is a misunderstanding. I was doing my job, protecting our community standards. By fining the Hendersons $500 for leaving their trash cans out 15 minutes past pickup. By making Mrs. Chen repaint her house 3 times because you couldn't decide if eggshell was too beige. The memories hit like physical blows. She'd been thorough, perhaps overzealous, but every action had been within her authority. The Henderson fine was technically valid. The CC and Rs clearly stated bins must be stored out of sight by 9 am. Mrs. Chen's paint had violated the approved color palette, even if the difference was barely perceptible. I followed the rules, she whispered. You were the rules, Karen. That's the problem. Through the window, she watched neighbors gathering on sidewalks, phones recording her soggy breakdown. The Morrisons, who she'd fined for unauthorized wind chimes. The Garcias, cited for a slightly overgrown hedge. The young couple from Maple Street, penalized for hanging a small American flag without proper HOA approval. Her phone buzzed with a text from her attorney. Emergency meeting at 4 p.m. This is bad, Karen, really bad. She'd spent 3 years building an impenetrable fortress of regulations, turning Willowbrook Estates into her personal fiefdom. Now the walls were crumbling, and she was trapped inside with the very people she'd alienated. The reporter knocked on her door, cameraman in tow, ready to broadcast her downfall to the entire city. Dave placed a hand on her shoulder. Maybe it's time to consider stepping down. Never. The word came out harder than she'd intended. I won't let them destroy everything I've built. But as she watched her neighbors' faces through the window, no sympathy, only satisfaction, Karen realized her real battle was just beginning. Karen sat in her attorney's mahogany-paneled office, her jaws set with newfound determination. The tears were gone, replaced by the calculating gleam that had made her feared throughout Willowbrook Estates. We fight this, she declared, ignoring her lawyer's raised eyebrows. Every violation notice I issued was legally justified under our CC and Rs. If they want a war, they'll get one. James Mitchell, senior partner at Mitchell and Associates, leaned back in his leather chair. Karen, the homeowners have documented patterns of harassment. Mrs. Chen has photos showing her paint samples were identical to approved colors. The Hendersons have security footage proving their bins were moved by wind, not negligence. Technical violations are still violations. Karen's voice carried the same authoritative tone that had silenced countless HOA meetings. I have documentation for everything. What she didn't tell Mitchell was the real reason she couldn't back down. The previous night, she'd discovered Dave had been secretly meeting with the neighborhood attorney. Her own husband was part of the conspiracy, probably feeding them information about her private HOA files. I need you to file countersuits, she continued. Harassment, defamation, conspiracy to damage my reputation. Start with the Hendersons. I have evidence they've been organizing these secret meetings. Mitchell's pen stopped moving. You want to sue your neighbors for organizing against you, for conspiring to undermine legitimate HOA authority. Karen opened her designer purse and pulled out a thick folder. Security camera footage, email records, witness statements. I've been building my own case. The truth was more complicated. For months, she'd noticed neighbors ducking into houses whenever she approached, conversations stopping when she entered the community pool area. Her Ring doorbell had captured hushed conversations on sidewalks, phones being discreetly tucked away when she appeared. She'd started documenting everything, initially for HOA enforcement, but now it would serve a different purpose. Karen, this could backfire spectacularly. Countersuing your neighbors will only make me look vindictive. She laughed bitterly. They already think I'm a monster. At least now I'll be a monster with legal representation. That evening, Karen stood in her kitchen, staring out at the Hendersons' house. Through their window, she could see a group of neighbors gathered around their dining table, papers spread out like battle plans. Dave should have been home an hour ago. Her phone rang. Mrs. Whitmore? This is Rebecca Torres from Channel 7. We're running a follow-up story about the HOA lawsuit. Would you like to comment on the neighbors' claims that you've been surveilling them? Karen's blood ran cold. Someone had leaked information about her documentation efforts. No comment. We also have reports that you're planning countersuits against the same neighbors who are suing you. Can you confirm? Karen hung up and immediately called Mitchell. No answer. She tried Dave's cell. Straight to voicemail. The house felt cavernous and hostile, filled with the weight of her own choices. She'd turned her neighbors into enemies, her husband into a stranger, and her community into a battlefield. But retreat wasn't in her vocabulary. Walking to her home office, she pulled out the HOA emergency contact list and began dialing board members. If the neighbors wanted to play hardball, she'd remind them who still held the presidential gavel. Patricia, it's Karen. I'm calling an emergency board meeting for tomorrow night. We need to discuss immediate enforcement actions against several homeowners. By dawn, she'd have new violation notices drafted and delivered. Let them sue her. She'd bury them in paperwork first. The emergency HOA board meeting that was supposed to rally support behind Karen instead became her political execution. One by one, the board members she'd handpicked and controlled for 3 years turned against her. Motion to remove Karen Whitmore as HOA president, announced Patricia Walsh, her former lieutenant. All in favor? 5 hands rose in perfect synchronization. Karen's own hand remained frozen at her side, her mouth opening and closing wordlessly as the gavel fell on her rein. You can't do this, she managed, though her voice cracked with the knowledge that they absolutely could. I have documentation proving every violation was legitimate. I have evidence of conspiracy. We've seen your evidence, Karen. Board member Tom Rodriguez slid a manila folder across the table, secretly recording neighbors at the pool, taking photos through their windows. You crossed the line from HOA enforcement into stalking. The folder contained printouts of her own security footage, but now they looked sinister instead of protective. Mrs. Chen watering her flowers while Karen's camera zoomed in on her face. The Henderson children playing in their yard, unknowingly under surveillance. Timestamps showing she'd been monitoring neighbors at all hours. The new board's first act will be settling the lawsuit, Patricia continued. Full apology, financial compensation, and your immediate resignation from all HOA positions. Karen stumbled out of the community center into the humid evening air. Her empire officially dissolved. The parking lot buzzed with neighbors who gathered to witness her downfall. Some applauded. Others simply stared with a mixture of relief and satisfaction. Dave waited by her car, his face etched with something between pity and disappointment. "The divorce papers are on your desk," he said quietly. "I'm staying at my brother's." "Dave, please. We can work through this. I was protecting our investment, our community. You were protecting your need to control everything." He pressed her car keys into her palm. "I can't be married to someone who turned our neighbors into enemies." Driving home through streets she'd once patrolled like a beat cop, Karen noticed things that would have triggered immediate violations. A slightly overgrown hedge, holiday lights still hanging in August, a small oil stain on the Rodriguez driveway. But she was no longer the keeper of Willowbrook Estate's perfection. Her house sat dark and empty, the symbol of everything she'd fought to preserve now feeling like a mausoleum. She'd won the battle for property values and lost the war for human connection. The next morning brought another certified letter, this one from Mitchell and Associates. They were dropping her as a client, citing irreconcilable differences in legal strategy. Translation: she was too toxic to represent.